So the first reason that you're going to know that your mix is done, this is the first way to know. And this is the way that most of the high level pros who actually mix day in and day out and do hundreds of mixes a year actually know when they're done. And that is, number one, that they've spent enough time on it. Now, this is the worst way to know that you're done when you're starting off mixing, because that exercise that we all go through of spending months to mix things and never being satisfied is part of how we learn to mix. By revisiting the same things again and again and banging our head against the same wall again and again. And when you're still getting your chops up and you're still in the beginning stages of this, just saying, I've spent enough time is the hardest way to know that you're done. But the better and better you get at this, the more you're going to have to say to yourself, the way that I know that I'm done is I allotted a block of time to mixing this record, and now that block of time is over. Because that is the way that the major mixers do it. Like if you were to go to Michael Brower, Chris Lord-Alge, Bob Clearmountain, Tony Maserati, any of these big people, they are not going to be fretting over your song for weeks on end, hoping they got it right. And they're not going to go in there saying, oh, I'm going to spend the first half of the day mixing this song for this client, and then say, oh, no, I just couldn't get it right. You know what? I'm going to have to spend the second half of the day too. And you know what? I'm going to have to go into day 3. No, they have other mixes to do. So as you get better and better at this, at a certain point, you have to say, the way that I know I'm done with this mix is that the time allotted to mix this song has passed. And that's how good this song is going to get in that reasonable amount of time allotted. Now, for Michael Brower or Tony Maserati or Manny Marroquin, on a track that's well laid out for them, their assistant has laid out for them as well. It came in good shape and their assistant put it in good shape, and now they're just in there to do the final mixing, like the most important part of mixing, controlling the emotional arc and prioritizing things and enhancing the feel of the track. They might do that even in a session with hundreds of tracks in it in 4 hours. 4 or 5 hours is a good amount of time to finish an entire mix of a song in. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy to you right now if you're not at the level where you're mixing songs in 4 or 5 hours. Even this idea of mixing a song and finishing in one day in an 8-hour chunk might sound like madness to you. But this really is a way that people work at the top level. And if you're starting to get good at this, one of the things I want you to start baking in sooner rather than later is to say that mixing for me is not about how good I can get it ultimately, but how good can I get it in the time allotted, if your goal is to do this professionally. Now, that said, to get to the place where you can do that, you might have to first go through the process of spending weeks and months mixing songs. And that's okay. But don't just plan to be there forever, because you shouldn't be. So number one reason to know your mix is done is you've set aside a reasonable amount of time to mix the song in that it should take you to mix a song in, and that time block is now over. The second one, if you're new to this, you're also going to hate a little bit, but you're going to start to love this one sooner than the first one, which is the second way to know that your mix is done is that you've finished your process. Now, if you've been doing this for a while and you're getting really good results, you're probably like, yeah, I know what you mean, Justin. I went through my process on this. I've gone through my steps, the order of my mix, and I'm done with it. That's how I know. But for some of you who are more in the beginning stages of this, you might say, process? What process? Mixing is all about creativity, man. And it's like, well, yes, it should be a creative act. But if you don't have a process, a repeatable order of operations, you're actually likely to be less creative because you're spending so much of your potential creative bandwidth instead of putting it into making the song sound fire. You're spending it like setting things up and thinking about what to do next and routing reverbs. Like, no, you need a process. And all of the best people who mix hundreds of songs in a year have repeatable processes. And here's the thing. Most of your favorite mixes where you're like, oh, that was cool. a huge portion of them have been done by people who have repeatable processes. And because they have a repeatable process, they get to be creative within that. They have they've created a sandbox that they can play in. But if what you're doing every time you start mixing is building the sandbox, you have like 5 minutes left to play at the end and you're tired and you just realize you don't have any like buckets or shovels or sand toys to play with. How's this analogy working out for you? Can you tell that I'm a dad? Right? I just made this one up on the spot, but I think this one makes sense. You really are not going to be able to have time or energy to play in the sandbox if you spend most of your time building it. But if you've built the sandbox in advance, every time you go into that sandbox, that piece of structure, now it's playtime, man. Today we're fighting dragons. Tomorrow we're playing house, you know? So that's a big thing. And just to give you insight into what this might look like, I'll right now give you in broad strokes, the kind of mixing framework I recommend in my full-length course, Mixing Breakthroughs, which is all about creating yourself a system for mixing. I give you a great starting place that you can adapt from, or you can just take it whole hog. But let me give you an overview of the system that's in Mixing Breakthroughs. Basically, it starts like this. You listen to the rough mix. This is what all the best mixers do. They listen to the rough mix and figure out what's good about the song, what's working about the song, what the artist's vision is for the song. And they make notes on the rough mix about what, if anything, needs to improve, what, if anything, needs to change. And here's an important part. Write down what you like and what's really working. Because if you go into a mix with the mindset of, oh, everything just sucks and it needs me to save it, I'm going to be the hero of this mix and take this sucky mix that sounds turd-like and I'm going to make it into the most royally polished turd ever. Thanks to me, this won't suck. If you go in there with that attitude, you're going to be fighting the mix the entire time. Whereas if you go in with the attitude of, oh, there's something cool in here. This is the point of the song. This is what works about the song. This is why this artist wrote this song or likes playing it or wants other people to hear it. I get what they're going for. And these are the nuggets that probably speak to them. And you know what? Here's some of the nuggets that they didn't notice could be brought out that I want to bring out. They have something so cool there and it's buried. How do we bring that out? Or, all this needs is a more signature sound on this one element. If you go in there with positive ideas based on the notes, that's going to be extremely helpful. And then after you've taken these notes, you set up your entire template. You don't do any mixing at first. If you're a person who can afford to hire an assistant, like if you're charging a few $100 to mix a song, you should consider right now hiring out an assistant to help organize your sessions. Even if you're only paying, a cheap one, $40 a session, or you're working at a higher end and you pay them $250 a session. But you could, for as little as $20 or $40, have people organize a session for you. The people all over the world would be thrilled to do that for you and get inside of a mix. And more and more reliable people might cost more and more. And the more you're making on mixes, the more you might want to spend in this area. But you could also do it yourself. Be your own assistant. Take that time to set up the tracks in advance, your template, your routing, all that stuff, maybe color coding. You're getting all that stuff out of the way, and now you're going to the mix. And what does the order of operations look like there? To me, it looks like using nothing but volume or pan to figure out the majority of the mix. Like you should be able to get 80% of your mix done using nothing but volume and pan. And then from there, the issues you couldn't solve, the things you couldn't make work with just volume and pan, you're looking at EQ. And then you're starting to say, I've done volume and pan and EQ, but there's still issues of consistency in certain areas or tonal density. And then we're diving into compression and going more and more into individual track compression and individual bus compression. For me, mixed bus compression, potentially, if you want to use it, starts earlier on when you're setting your initial balances, but that's an aside that we go into in more detail in the course. And then only after that am I looking to put in effects. And this is a place you want to have a lot of energy left, creative energy left, because it shouldn't just be about, like, let's put on a good sounding vocal delay and a good sounding vocal reverb. You should also be thinking about, this bridges into the next one, automation. How are we going to automate these effects? How are we going to do, are there little delay throws we can do? If you can do 1 to 3 delay throws on a vocal on a song, that can just massively change things. Or find one or two snare hits or drum fills or other moments to do a temporary signature colorful moment on. That can totally transform a song. You don't have to be crazy with it. You don't have to do it all the time. Certain genres want more of this, like EDM. Certain genres want less of it, like rootsy rock. But looking for those ideas, and then automation being kind of one of the final steps in this process. And then after all that's done, and this volume automation is big, by the way. I can't stress this enough, and this is something beginners just don't do enough of. They mix like the whole track at once, and they just hope these settings work for the entire track. That's usually not how it works on really, really good mixes. So once you've done all of that, there's a next step for me, which is hugely important, which is actually writing down, doing the same process you did with a rough mix of sitting down the couch, not touching a single knob. We do our best mixing when we're not mixing. We've done a lot of that. And now we're sitting down in the back of the room. We're not touching anything. And we're just listening to the track. And again, making note of what, if anything, needs to change. And this brings us to number 3, the number 3 way you know that you're done with your mix. And this is one of the most important ones, is that you've checked everything off of your list of things that needed to be improved or changed, and there's nothing left that's obvious that needs to be fixed or improved. That's a big one. And this one I almost had to separate out from the whole idea of having a process because it really is its own separate thing. It's like the second mix that you do almost. And this mix happens really quickly because you've done 80 or 90, 95% of your mixing. But now you're going back and almost treating your mix like the rough mix and going through that same process again. You got a rough mix, you listened to it, you took notes. You went through your entire process. You put it through the funnel. You put it through the machine, but you're creatively operating that machine. It's almost like the song is gas that you put into your engine and now you're driving the thing, right? Like you've put it into the machine, but now you're doing creative human things with that machine-like system in which you're mixing. Maybe the sandbox analogy was better. So now we're coming out the other end and almost going back to the first part of the process of, let me treat my song like someone else mixed it. Let me treat my mix like someone else mixed it. Let me sit back, listen to it. What, if anything, needs to change? What's really working? What should I not mess up here? And without touching a thing, write down all the stuff you can think of. Maybe in one passive listening, maybe in two passive listening. And then don't get distracted. Just go in and only address those things. And then do this again, this process again. Now, if you want so much more detail on exactly how to do every part of this process and real insights into making each part of this process go faster, this is where I give the shout out to the sponsors. If you want super deep, Mixing Breakthroughs is a course that's all about that. Check it out at mixingbreakthroughs.com. It has changed the lives of thousands of people who have taken it. The before and afters I've heard are amazing. The testimonials we get that are up on the website, all of them are legit, like ones that have come in to my email or as YouTube comments or as Twitter comments. Every single one of those is real. And every single one of those is people going like, I just leapfrogged in my ability to mix. Thank you. I didn't know that was possible to get that much better, that much faster. Because a lot of people go through mixing without a plan, without a vision. It's just like if you were exercising. I don't know if any of you have ever gotten into exercising, gotten into physical training. And like you could mess around in the gym, walk on the treadmill, you do some bicep curls, whatever. You can do that for years and make zero progress. But as soon as someone gives you an actual program that they know works, like here's a linear progression strength training program with barbells, and here's the way you do it, and you actually do that for the first time, you're like, oh, I actually got stronger and my muscles got larger. And that happened in like 3 months. And I've been doing years of, I don't want to use vulgarity here, but years of messing around, years of mucking about. F-arounditis, they call it. Years of messing about in the gym, nothing happened. But now, like an actual program that actually gives results, it's like, I didn't know this was possible after 90 days and 180 days and a year. I mean, it's incredibly altering. And the same thing is possible with mixing. If you like that short clip, you might love the full-length video that it came from, or you can consider becoming a member. Just hit the join button down below. If you really want to go deep and change the way that you mix forever for the better, check out one of my great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs, or Mastering Demystified. Each one of them is guaranteed to change the way you work forever for the better or your money back. Hope to see you on the other side.